Hi everyone, I'm Mary Stagaman, the Senior Inclusion Advisor at the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber and a proud member of the ArtsWave Board of Directors, and really glad to be here with you for this session today. About a year ago, I think we got together to talk about issues of attraction and retention of talent in our region, and I think that's going to be a thread in our conversation today as well, but I couldn't be more excited about what's to come. These Lunch and Learn sessions sponsored by ArtsWave have really, I think, started to change the conversation in our community about how we all work together, and we're particularly glad today to be sharing the space with Chorus America, which is having its conference here in Cincinnati right now, and it was through their generosity that we were able to schedule our speaker today. You all know about ArtsWave's Blueprint for Collective Action. I expect that all of you have it posted above your desk, so that every day you can get up and sort of say it like a mantra of what we're going to do. We really believe that the Blueprint is our way to leverage the power of the arts to bring the community together and to create a more vibrant economy for the Cincinnati region. And one of the Blueprint goals, and the one that resonates the most for me and the one we're talking about today, is about the arts' power to bridge cultural divides. Why does this matter? Well, for me personally, it starts with the arts' ability to transcend the everyday, to take us out of the routine of our work and our lives and to get into a space that opens up our heads and allows us to think in some new ways, to be swept away sometimes to an entirely other place. I think it's about the arts opening up the human experience for us so that we tend to not see people who don't look like us as the other. We tend to begin to understand and to develop empathy for people who didn't grow up in the same place we did, whose the color of their skin is different, their country of origin may be different than ours, and so on. And so as we're able to look past that, we grow as people. So it would be enough if the arts only did that. But as someone who works in a business-facing organization, I have to tell you that there's even more power in the room than that. And that is the fact that we really believe that the arts, especially if they can express the community we want to be, the place we want to go to, the diverse, inclusive region that we are working to become, then you are a powerful tool in the attraction and retention of talent and the development of the leaders we will need for the future of this region. So we're going to talk today about how that might happen and how we can work together as arts organizations and cultural treasures to really bridge those cultural divides and bring people together in new ways. We're lucky enough today to have a speaker who can deal with this topic very deeply. She's literally written the book on the topic. Donna Walker-Kuhne is the author of the bestseller Invitation to the Party, Building Bridges to Arts, Culture, and Community. Donna is the Vice President, Community Engagement for the New Jersey Performing Arts Center, and she is also the founder of Walker International Communications Group, a boutique marketing, press, and audience development consulting agency. She has provided multicultural marketing for more than 20 Broadway productions. Listen to this list: A Raisin in the Sun, A Streetcar Named Desire, The Gershwins' Porgy and Bess, Stickfly, Time Stands Still, Driving Miss Daisy, and Ragtime, just for starters. And she's worked with numerous nonprofit arts organizations around the world. She's the recipient of the 2012 Women of Excellence Award from the National Action Network and was named one of the 25 most influential Black women from the Network Journal in 2008. Please join me in welcoming Donna to Cincinnati.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? Good. Oh, I love wonderful. Me too, and I'm really delighted to be here. I was last here a long time ago, but it was such a wonderful experience, so I'm glad to be back. So there's a lot of things, of course, that I'd like to share with you. We have a brief time together, but I really want to emphasize the importance of making the commitment to authentic community engagement, and that is important internally as well as externally. I know that a lot of you are thinking about audiences, but actually it begins inside of your organization, and it begins with creating a culture of diversity. So this is not just a topic, it's not just lunch, this is actually the way you do business. It is the way that you behave, it's the way that you think. And so that's why I call it a culture of diversity. Therefore, all of the decisions you make will reflect that kind of thinking. And so it'll be as if, well, how can we promote this and we don't have the people that we're talking about in the room? How can we talk about building leadership and we don't have those constituents on our board, on our staff, in leadership positions? I don't count secretaries and receptionists. When I talk about diversity in our organizations, those are people who can make decisions. And that's people of color who can make decisions, who have that authority. That's the level that we're discussing. So that's where we begin, and it's really important to just jump in and let's move the needle. Because I know you've been talking about this, which is great. So we've talked, now we act. That's where we are right now, and I believe the arts demand it, and they deserve it. And obviously, you're committed, or you wouldn't be here, because you could have your lunch someplace else. So I'm glad that you are here. And so when we talk about leadership, I think it starts at the top. And so for the executive directors, artistic directors, and board chairs in the room, actually the vision and the authority has to start at that place. And so that the institution then understands this is how we do business because my boss has said this, the president has said this, the chairman of our board has initiated and supports this effort. It's very difficult for a marketing director to lead a successful cultural diversity initiative, because you only operate within your own department. But when you have the president, the CEO saying, this is part of our mission, it begins to affect the way everyone in the organization does business. And so then you can work more collaboratively. And so that's why I believe that the leadership component is critical and is a starting point. And then, once we have the leadership in place, and for me, I've been very fortunate in my career to work in organizations that have had that kind of institutional leadership. I first started my career working at the Dance Theater of Harlem. And Arthur Mitchell, was very clear that he wanted to see diverse audiences. So it wasn't so much seeing African Americans as it was seeing, let's see everybody here in the audience, And as we toured around the country, we noticed that there were pockets of, missing individuals, particularly in urban cities. We weren't seeing a lot of African Americans. And so my work began in starting to cultivate, those communities in particular. But it was because Arthur Mitchell said, this is how we're going to do business. And then when I went to the public theater working with George C. Wolfe, George said, I've been here at the public theater about 3 months, and I noticed the audiences are predominantly white. And I'd like this place to look like a subway stop. How would you do it? So that was his vision. And as the producer there, he was able to affect the way all of us did business together so that the work that we did, the programming that we did, the hiring of the staff, all of those decisions reflected that one goal, looking like a subway stop. And now in my current, position at New Jersey Performing Arts Center, John Schreiber is an incredible businessman. And so our arts center functions as a nonprofit and as a business, as a corporation. And so one of the things that, John and I talked about, because originally I was hired as the vice president of marketing. And in that role, I was really responsible for generating income, which didn't leave a lot of time for cultivating audiences, which is what I'm known for and what I've done for the past 35 years. And I was becoming frustrated walking to work every day in Newark, passing all these people who I knew were not coming inside the building. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And so I sat down with John and I said, look, we're leaving money on the table. We're missing opportunities to cultivate our neighbors, our family. I believe I can make this happen, but not in this current position. And so he said, would you like to be vice president of community engagement? And so that's how we began to develop the department and develop the mission statement that we have and our goals and our dashboard. All of those things came from these internal conversations about what's missing and how we have to be committed to making things change. And so I'm really encouraging you to look at this from a leadership position and then also for what is the institutional vision. So what does it look like? So you're all here because you want to see a broadening of what your constituents look like or your colleagues, but what does that actually look like? I believe you have to know. I believe, and when I say know, meaning that in your head and in your heart, you have clearly articulated what that will look like. And then that becomes your motivation each day. I'm aspiring to get to that goal. I'm getting to this goal. And so that's where the kind of marketing tactics come in, so that you're thinking about it in layers, perhaps. Okay, so this year we'll start with what's the low-hanging fruit. So because I'm African American, I always start there first, because I know my community and they're very forgiving if I make a mistake. So I start there, and then, we expand. So of course in the East we have a large influx of Hispanic, so that I work a lot with our Latino, our Portuguese, Cuban, Ecuadorian, all those communities. Then the next year I work with the South Asian, and so I build. You can't do everything at once. I don't think anyone in this room has that kind of financial resource, but you can start to put it on a trajectory, so that at the end of your plan, you can see where you want to go. What does the map look like? And so I'm encouraging you to now visualize this. It goes beyond just a conversation to now we have a plan, a map. And then we build our strategies, we look at what internal resources we need, and then we implement and activate. And then you're constantly assessing and reviewing. Is it working? What have I missed? What did the community say? That's how you really develop, this kind of plan. So what are some of the core principles that we need to be cognizant of? I think it's important to have dialogue, such as we're having today. So what we're having today, you can replicate in your organization on a monthly basis. This is what I do. We have our brown bag lunch, where we talk about cultural diversity, equity and inclusion, accessibility, whatever the topic is, and different staff members take ownership of the theme and they unpack that over lunch. So this could be an organizational-wide conversation. So you could say, I just went to this lunch and we had this conversation about, cultural diversity. What do you think about that? And so you start to talk about it. That's how you build the culture, so that the person who's presenting for the month may have to do a little bit of research, or may just talk about, well, I'm the receptionist, so I don't even know what my role would be in terms of changing the dynamics here. Or it may be, some of your senior staff. But the point is, we need to have these conversations on an ongoing basis, and I think food never hurts. Never. You can't go wrong with that. So dialogue and share information. And not just internally, but this body represents, also a constituency that I think that you can collaborate perhaps more deeply and share resources more deeply. So I know that, you're focusing on creating more opportunities where you can gather together. So this is very valuable. Another core principle, of course, you're getting funding, some of you, to be able to implement some of these initiatives, but just know that the funding is just half of the implementation. The other half is to know what to do with it. So make sure that if you're receiving funding to develop a cultural diversity initiative, that the very people you want to engage are in the room, that they're at the table, so that you're not just assuming or thinking, oh, maybe they want this, maybe they want that. Bring them in the room so that the conversation then resonates in truth, in reality, and respect. It's really important. Another core principle is to create a presence in the diverse communities on a consistent level. So sometimes, we have these annual events. I hear a lot about the Black History Month. I call it Black Hysterical Month. But in February, there's this plethora of events that happen regarding Black history. Okay, that's cute. What happens the other 11 months? And why can't we have a presence there more consistently and regularly? And so think about, what is my presence in these communities? What organizations have I joined? What meetings do I regularly attend? That's how you build that culture, and frankly, the kind of respect. And then using our educational sectors more as art partners. Colleges and universities, I think, are a fantastic resource for building our diverse audiences. We have students who are not just studying a particular subject, but they're also studying life. So how can you engage them more? Working with the directors of student life, working more with the deans, working more with programs that resonate with the art that you present, and approaching these colleges and universities that you have content that will help the students better understand these subjects, because we're doing Shakespeare. You know, we're doing a classical ballet piece. We're doing a symphony. You know, all of these art forms resonate in daily life, whatever, you know, the actual presentation is. So use that as a resource as well. And so the goals for creating diversity, what are our goals? I think it's to build participation. And it's for us to understand how communities enter the arts. So that means, what are the psychographics of communities of color? How do people actually go to an arts experience? How do they go? How do you leave your house? What does that look like? Is it with my friends? Okay, my girlfriend, she's gonna meet me for dinner first. We're gonna have something to drink first. Do we go as a group? I'm going with my church group. How do people go to the arts? This is something you have to understand. You have to do the research to figure that out, because that's how you then start to build the relationships and where you invest your resources, you know, when supporting those efforts. Is it a membership-based kind of initiative? Well, we know that memberships certainly aren't what they were 20 years ago in the arts, and that a lot of people, particularly younger audiences, don't really want to decide, you know, today where we're going to be in 3 months, 4 months. I mean, the only thing I'm going to decide and make that commitment for is my tickets to Hamilton. I'm okay with buying my ticket now for next April. I'm okay with that, because that's the only way I'm going to be able to see it. But here, and the rest of the world, you know, people may not necessarily want to make that kind of commitment. So when you think about membership, that may not be the way or the strategy for building, you know, this kind of cultural participation. So this is up to you to look at, how do I understand the psychographics of the people that I want to engage? So some of the tools for dynamic community engagement. So I think the most important tool is financial support. This isn't free. It costs to develop new audiences. It costs to do audience development. It costs, whether it's your staff time, it's a marketing initiative, so you need all the tools of marketing. You need collateral. You need to have access to the digital platforms. You need to be able to do special events and promotions. All of those things cost. And so if you're thinking, yeah, we can go do this, yeah, but it's not an order of French fries. This is the main course. When we look at today's culture and we look at all of the things that are going on in the world that reflect a lack of understanding of people who are different from you, now more than ever, we have to invest the resources, financial resources, to allow us to be better at our work, to allow us to be able to explore what these differences look like, and how we realize it's really, we're all the same. So financial support, critical, absolutely. Then secondly, in terms of strategies, is our staff recruitment and development. And so, you know, I travel around the world speaking about this topic, and generally the rooms look like this, no matter where I go. And in fact, I have to congratulate Cincinnati, because frankly, there are more people of color here than many of the other cities that I go to. So congratulations on that. I think that's significant. For you, it may be like, oh my gosh, but I'm just telling you from a global perspective, what I see here in the room is more than what I've seen in many other places. Last week being in Baltimore, I mean, just everywhere. So I'm very hopeful for Cincinnati. Yay! Don't get comfortable. I'm just saying, this is better than what I've seen, but there's way more that we have to do. So when we talk about staff recruitment, the response is never going to be, I can't find them. That's not an answer. That is not an answer. So if you say that to yourself, get out of the business, because the arts deserve better, and that means you're not committed. So the answer is, I will find the individuals who represent the communities I want to cultivate with the skill set, and I will do whatever it takes. That's the answer. That's the only answer. So I'm encouraging each of you to make that commitment. So the next time you have one of these, there should be more. There has to be more. Otherwise, you'll say, well, I can't go. It has to be, we're now at that point. Because I've been having these conversations since 1986, just myself. So, you know, I'm kind of done with the conversations. I'm looking for action. And if I create my own action, I might get into trouble. So I'm asking you to do that. Okay, so another tool is, which we've talked about, so building this culture of diversity, which talks about the internal dialogue and the internal awareness that you bring back to your different organizations. And then developing long-term relationships. So I'm sure most of you know, building cultural diversity, engaging diverse audiences is not instantaneous. It's not like taking an aspirin and everything goes away and clears up. It's like, oh my, this is wonderful. It's hard work. It is very labor intensive, but most importantly, it takes time because you're building trust. You're educating communities about your particular art form, and then you're developing these relationships and exploring where partnerships might exist. So all of this takes time, and this is in addition to all of the other work that you have to do. So, we know that this requires some balancing, in your daily life. But understanding that the partnerships, I believe, is where we have the greatest success. Because when we're approaching arts organizations or communities, faith-based institutions, educational sectors, our libraries, our corporate partners, when we're approaching them from the position of, we want to work with you on a long-term basis to build a culturally diverse audience. How can we do that together? Then you know that you're now on a trajectory that's going to take you into some amazing opportunities, which can include functioning with looking at the Heritage Months. So, Hallmark has given us a favor because they've named all of these months that can help us with our programming. And so you think about, okay, how can I work more in the corporate sector? Well, many corporations have employee affinity groups, so they are looking for things for Black Hysterical Month and Asian Pacific Heritage Month and Latino Heritage Month, those kinds of months, Women's History Month, Pride Month. So what are you doing as arts organizations to provide content for that, to establish the kind of relationship so that the employees see that there is a connection between them working in the corporation and the communities in which they're a part of? How do you make that happen? So that's one of the ways you can build partnerships. I work a lot with churches. I think the faith-based community is an incredible resource for cultural partnerships. There's such an interest, I find, in the spiritual connection between the arts and culture. And so when I work with the churches, I work on many different levels. I work with the youth ministries because most ministers, pastors, are concerned about keeping their youth out of trouble. They just want the kids to act right. Okay, so how do kids act right? Well, part of that is being engaged and having things that they find of interest. Well, where does that come from? I don't know where that is. Yeah, but they have it. This dance company, they have it. This orchestra, they have it. Meaning, you invite them in to come and do workshops, to do master classes, and then bring them to performances. You start this level of engagement, and then you get the parents involved. So now it becomes this kind of holistic effort where members of the congregation are looking forward to, what's the artistic flavor this month? What are we going to do next month? I heard about this group. So it becomes a way to start to build participation. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity that we may not have yet tapped into with our faith-based community. I encourage you to look at that. And then programming. Okay, so it's really important that the programming in some way reflect the communities that we want to engage. I don't believe it has to be exclusive, but I do believe it's a way in. So if we're talking about approaching new communities, neighborhoods, partners for the first time, more than likely they want to see something that looks like them. And so that is a place to begin. I also find that in the world of the traditional classics, that sometimes there's this a lack of expansion in defining what is classic, certainly here in America. And so for our orchestras and symphonies, it is certainly not just Mozart and Beethoven, that there are people of color who also have works that are classic. And those need to be rolled out. Those need to be presented, certainly as a way in. And so the idea of who owns the work, what is the authority behind this? That has to expand so that from a programming perspective, everyone can find themselves in the story. So if you work at an organization where the programming is already set, or you may be in a museum where the curators aren't necessarily so engaging, then you have to think about, what else can I do? And so when I first started working at the Public Theater, the season had already been set. There were 11 plays. I knew nothing about theater. I had just come from a ballet company. I literally knew nothing. I left Dance Theater of Harlem on a Friday, started at the Public on a Monday. So here I am, theater. What do I do with this? And frankly, Shakespeare was my best friend because, Shakespeare is so universal. I could talk to everyone about that, and still is really one of my favorite components of theater because of the universality of the words and the plays. But at that time, we were presenting very interesting works, I will just say that. And so from a programming perspective, it was like, okay, how do I engage these new audiences? And I don't even understand what these plays are about. So what do I use? So I started to visit various organizations. How did I find them? I went through the yellow pages. 1993, we did not have Google. Some of you can't even imagine a world without Google, but there's some of us here who remember. So the yellow pages were our Google, and I went through the yellow pages for Manhattan and pulled out anything that wasn't a restaurant or something that looked a little shady, and I called them up and said, my name is Donna, I am calling from the Public Theater. We have this brand new initiative called Cultural Explosions, and I'd love to come and talk to you about it. I had no clue what to say, but I wanted to get the appointment, the meeting, and I figured if we just sit there and look at each other long enough, something would evolve. And so I got these appointments. People were like, sure, you're from the Public Theater? Yeah, come on down, let's see, let's go, let's talk. And I would ask them, have you ever been to the Public Theater? Why not? What would you like to see? How do you see yourself engaged with our theater? So that became my market research, as well as introducing myself to these new communities, and for me to learn, what do people really want to experience? We can't sit in the judgment seat and decide we know what your cultural experience should be. Like, how dare us? We don't know that. Our job, all of us in this room, our job is to create access to the arts, not to decide what your art experience should be. I don't think any one of us can get inside someone's head to decide that, but we certainly want to make it as gracious and welcoming and respectful as possible. And so meeting with these organizations, one of the things that I learned when I was at the Public, and that was, they said, we want to do something at the Public Theater. So I thought, whoa, programming, I can't touch that. I didn't even know who they were at that point, but I knew I couldn't promise a person, sure, we'll produce your next play, no problem. We got a couple of million laying around. But what I could say was, well, you know what? We have space. Why don't you take the space for 2 hours on the third Sunday of May? And then I'll give it to you the third Sunday of June. So that created a program we called Free at 3. So the third Sunday of every month, I gave one of our open spaces to our various organizations that we met. And then we started to link those Free at 3 to what were the plays we were doing on the main stage, so it became a way to unpack some of those themes and plays that needed a deeper kind of understanding and commitment. And that signature program, ran for the whole 9 years that I was there, that allowed us to bring in new communities, as a way to taste and to get a sense of, okay, I know what the building looks like, great. I know where the restrooms are, great. Yeah, we had a 2-hour panel discussion or stage reading. Some people had yoga workshops there. I didn't mind. It was fine. As long as it was legal, come on in and use this space for 2 hours so that you start to own the space. So those are the small areas, that can really make a difference, I think, in terms of just ownership. So programming becomes very important. And if you don't have the opportunity to inform programming at this point, think about what else you can do that will still, convey some of the essence of your work and allow you to touch some of these new communities. And so, I think that the significance in that is something that's very, very important. Everyone is a stakeholder. I don't want you to overlook anyone that works with you, but to realize that everyone that's a part of your team, part of your organization, part of your community is a stakeholder in this goal for us to create the kind of audiences, that we dream of. And I think it has to be a sincere, concerted effort to really help everyone understand their role. So what is my role? What am I supposed to actually do? And of course it depends on where you sit. But certainly I think everyone has to be looking outward to see how can we make this more inclusive from where I sit, and so that becomes really crucial. We go back to this whole idea of recruiting staff. In New York, our commissioner of the arts issued a statement, it was in the New York Times, that he was going to have a survey of all of the cultural organizations that receive funding from the city, the major cultural organizations, that he wanted to get a sense of what is their staff level of diversity. So people started panicking because, of course, we know in some of our major cultural institutions it's quite modest. But he was very clear, and he said, this is not punitive in nature. This is for us to learn how we can better serve our community. And so I want you to not be afraid to ask the questions, because it's happening around the country. And we're seeing it with our funders. Ford Foundation has issued a statement that they're now giving money more for public welfare, more to engage students, more to look at issues of cultural equity. So the trend is certainly moving in this direction from a funding perspective, from city legislators who want to make sure they're being responsive to the changing demographics of our country. So you should ask yourself, where am I in this conversation? Where am I specifically, me as an individual? What am I doing? And what am I doing every single day? It's no longer something you can just pick up when you have an extra 5 minutes. Oh, I got 10 minutes left today. Let me see what I can do towards cultural diversity. That's not how this works. This is a lifelong commitment. And it is something that, you really have to think about. Am I the best person to really be the one to activate this? And it's okay if the answer is no. I just ask that you get out of the way so we can make sure the appropriate person is there. So it's okay if you feel this might be a little bit more than I can handle. So this whole idea of strategic partnerships is something I also want to just take another look at, because that I think is where we can use a lot of the marketing collaborations and tools and advertising alliances and our press. So it's like, how does everything tell the story? So just keep in mind, now we're focusing on building cultural diversity. So create the narrative. What is the narrative? The narrative is your story. How are you doing this? So today is one part of your narrative. You attended this session. Next part of the narrative, we're looking at our programming. Then we're looking at the summer coming up. There's lots of outdoor festivals, there's block parties. How are you going to be a part of that? And where do you talk about this? So this is how you use your social media more effectively to engage diverse audiences. So now your Facebook and Twitter posts and Instagram photos should be reflecting this whole effort, this initiative. Use your social media to talk about this more. At NJPAC, we have found that when we post about community engagement, we get several hundred more likes than when we just talk about Diana Ross is coming next week. That's great, Diana Ross is coming, but how does that affect me as an arts patron? How does that affect me, being a part of this whole cultural diversity initiative? And so, utilize those resources, as much as you can. And realize that ultimately what we're doing is creating this access and inclusion, this whole idea that everyone has a seat at the table, which does not mean that our core audiences are now displaced. It never, ever means that. So building new audience doesn't mean that current audiences get pushed to the side. It means that we add more chairs to the table. It means that we inform them about what we're doing. When I first started at the Public, George announced my department actually before I had left Dance Theater of Harlem, which was kind of wild because some of the board members on Dance Theater of Harlem's board were on the Public Theater's board. So that was a very interesting little scenario. But, what was great was that, in announcing all of this, it allowed us to say, as an institution, this is what we're going to do moving forward, and allowed me to share my vision. So I didn't know what the action steps were going to be, but I certainly could say, I've been given the goal of creating an audience that looks like a subway stop, and this is how I'm going to go about doing it. So I encourage you to claim it. Stop looking to the right and the left to see who's going to do it. It's you. You're here, so you're the ones that are going to do it. And if you haven't started, today's your day. And so, some recommendations that I have, which I've already discussed, but just to repeat, engage your leadership and secure commitment to develop an understanding of community engagement, to create this culture of engagement and provide the budget necessary to execute it over a long period of time. We need all those components to happen. This isn't welfare. We're not social workers. We're not fixing a problem. There is no problem. People aren't coming because they've chosen not to, but they're not broken. So it's really important that we understand the sensibility and the attitude we have towards engaging people of color, even if we're talking about different levels of class within the society. So if you're dealing with neighborhoods, which people call them underserved. So underserved to me has a cloud, that word. It sounds like something's wrong. There's nothing wrong. I just didn't want to come to see you today. But I'm not wrong. I just chose not to come. It's a choice. And it doesn't mean that I'm not being culturally fulfilled. I'm doing what I want to do, and I'm going to see who I want to see. It's just not you. And so you really have to understand this in the core of your being, that we are all equal. Every last person, whether you are making 100,000, 10,000, 1,000 a year, as a people, we are equal. Now, this is a little challenging because in America, we do have a class issue, which we refuse to acknowledge. We pretend we are a classless society. But I believe class is the #1 issue in America beyond race. It's class. It's where one fits. Where do you belong? Where should you be? What's appropriate? So I believe it's in the arts where we can start to transcend these differences. That's what I believe. But I also believe that we have to check ourselves to see how do we feel about these people we're saving. Just remember, nobody needs to be saved. We're fine. We are so fine. As a matter of fact, you need us. The whole reason we're here is to figure out how do we engage these communities of color. And so the attitude is critical. People can feel that. You don't have to say it. They can feel it. So you may say, well, we tried. We went here. We spoke to this one. Yeah, what did you go with? In other words, what was in your heart? What was in your head? Because that's where people respond, that place. We can give them the pretty flyers and the brochures and the free tickets, but what do you really feel? That's where people respond. So that's where you have to do the work. I had to do the work. I'll be very honest with you. When I started working at the Public Theater, my whole world was black. I didn't know anybody that wasn't black. I didn't want to. I was fine. I'm like, I'm good. And then George says, I want an audience that looks like a subway stop. And I went, uh-oh, that means I have to get to know other people. How do I do that? I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody that's Jewish. I don't know any Latino folks. Asian? Oh my gosh. Well, how do I find that? Well, first of all, do I care? Yes, I care because I love the arts. Okay, yeah. So I have to first get that part straight. Then, how do I open up my life to be able to be authentic in this experience? So I hired people that resonated with the different communities. One of my team members was Puerto Rican, another one was Vietnamese, and then I had a Native American, because I couldn't pretend to know the cultural nuances of these different communities, so I needed someone that could open those doors and help me to understand. But I also read a lot, and then I joined organizations so I could physically be in those environments, so I could learn and absorb. And so you're thinking, now, I do not have time to do all of that. Okay, I'm just sharing with you what my process was, because I wanted to be as authentic as possible, because I believe the arts deserve that. This wasn't about Donna. This was about how can I best respond to the beauty of the arts, to the feeling I get, the goosebumps that I get when the lights go up. How do I respond to that? But I do believe it requires something beyond what you are currently doing. Otherwise, I don't think you would be here. So, a lot of you may have free events. So one thing I just want to be really clear about, free does not build audiences. Free makes sure your house is full. Done. If you are an organization that all of your events are free by nature, that's different. Then you start to use these opportunities in a more strategic way. Then you start to look at heads of different community-based organizations and churches and youth groups that you can invite as your guest. And then you follow up with them. And then you sit down and talk about what was this experience. That's when you have all of your programming is free. But if you're a theater, a dance company, a symphony, orchestra, and you find, oh my goodness, we've only sold 30%, we've got to get some bodies in here, then be strategic. Then you have your checklist. Here's some of the community leaders I've been wanting to talk to anyway. Here's a good opportunity to do that. So, John, I know that you have this great organization, 100 Black men, and I would love to be able to extend tickets to you as my guest, but I want to make sure we understand this is building a relationship. So I'd like to know, one, that the gentlemen who come are going to agree to give us their email information so that we can continue to have a dialogue with them, that they will promote it on their social media pages. I'd like to see this explosion on Facebook about their experiences, that they may distribute our collateral where they work, where they shop, where they go to the cleaners, and that perhaps we might gather again later. Then you're starting to use your comping strategically. If you're free, becomes a portal into creating access. But just to say, here, take those 100 tickets and please make sure the person is alive, that's not a way to build audiences. As I said, it's a way to make sure the house is full, which we all have been in those situations. And then ambassadors. I think ambassadors is one of the most amazing ways to really cultivate the partnerships that we talk about. I think everyone likes to feel valued. And so when you tell a person, we're creating ambassadors for the arts at our organization, and we would like you to be one of our ambassadors, I've never heard a no. Even if the person said no, I didn't hear them, and I made it a yes, but I still don't think that they said no. I think my experience has been, when I go into a community, for instance, in Newark, I knew no one in Newark 4 years ago. I live in Brooklyn. All my work in New York has been in New York. And so when I was asked to come out to Newark, I thought, oh, why would I go to Newark? That's for people who was just so nasty. The things that I said was terrible. Because I hadn't been to Newark, and I just thought, oh, that's a place for the other people. And then when I went, and I thought, oh, this is a fabulous city. It's burgeoning. It's in a renaissance. We have a new mayor. You know, all kinds of things are happening in downtown Newark. And I said, I want to be a part of this, because this is a movement that I think is going to really be significant. So I use myself as an example. Okay, so you snob. Why do you feel so snobby about this neighborhood? And then, you know, who and how are you going to engage these communities that you don't know anyone? And so I just started to go out to some of the restaurants and just place myself in different neighborhoods. And I started to meet women. And I told them, I said, you know, I just started here in NJPAC, and, you know, I want to help develop audiences. And they said, well, we'll host something for you. So I started being invited to these dinners at their homes. And I could make these personal, kind of intimate presentations about what we were doing as an arts center. And that has expanded in ways that are unimaginable. I had no idea what would happen as a result of that. But I have found that I've tried to develop this idea of ambassadorship or advisory council where, you know, you are part of my think tank and I can't make a decision without you. That becomes something that people really value. And so I encourage you to look at your checklists and see, who do I have that has kind of been buzzing around and maybe haven't landed in terms of a role? Someone from the community, you know, that says, oh, I like what you guys do, or my daughter, you know, she goes to your programs. That person's subtext is saying, use me, and so I'm encouraging you to look with that lens. So let me just, in wrapping up, talk about NJPAC specifically. I think you have my PowerPoint printed out on your desk. So I wanted to show you this because this is an example of, you know, building a department, developing new programs, and then how do we measure success? Because I know that all of you are responsible for, you know, how do I evaluate success for my efforts? How am I doing for time? I'm okay? Okay. So when I first set up the department, I thought about what makes us an arts center. What should I focus on? We present over 400 events per year. I can't possibly look at those as like, this is how I'm going to build an audience. 400 events, my gosh. I only have a staff of 5, so it's, you know, what can we do? So we said, well, as an arts center, we focus on jazz, classical music, dance, and theater. That's what makes us a mission-based arts center. And so that's what I'm going to focus on. And I'm going to layer that with the different communities of color. And that intersection is how we're going to be engaging our community. So I started with a literary component because I love to read. And I had, at home, I have a children's book on Alvin Ailey. And I thought, oh, it'd be great because we promote Alvin Ailey every year for our Mother's Day weekend. And I thought, oh, I'd love to lead up to the Ailey performances by having children more involved in understanding the life of this amazing choreographer. So I called the writer, whom I happen to know for the book, and I said, do you have a couple of extra copies of the book laying around? I want to go to some libraries, to the children's reading groups, and start a program. She said, no, I gave them all out, but if you call Disney, they may have some. So I called Disney Publishing, and they sent me 200 copies, which was great, because that's what I wanted. Always ask big. Always. Never go for the little stuff. I'm serious. Go ask big and start at the top, because we don't have time for the other stuff now. We got to put this on the fast track. And so you want to go to the heads of as many organizations as you can, and you want to ask for as much as you can. So with these 200 books, it allowed me to travel to 6 different libraries, to the children's reading rooms, to have our arts education teaching artists not only read to the kids, but activate some of the choreography from Revelations to really make it come alive. And so this allowed us to do 2 things. One, to start to educate a much younger audience, but also for them to go home with this information and talk about it at home. But the places that we went became our promotional partners. So these libraries were now thrilled. They're like, wow, you brought programming to us. This is fabulous. They put up the posters, the flyers, and then it's like, okay, what's next? What are you coming with the next time? So this program we call Books on the Move, because we move all throughout Newark and to some of the surrounding towns. We go to Maplewood, Irvington, different kinds of towns where they may not necessarily have had access to this information. So in my first year, we did Alvin Ailey. This year, we did Ella Fitzgerald. Next year, we're going to do Celia Cruz. So each year, we're building on the different artists that we take. The cost of this is under $1,000. Because if the books aren't donated, I buy them through First Books. If you're not familiar with that program, First Books is fantastic. They work with publishers from around the country to be able to sell books to nonprofits who are working in the community for $1 or $2. And so that's how I'm able to afford to do this work. And then jazz. Okay, so NJPAC presents this Moody Jazz Festival every November. And for any of you who are jazz aficionados or produce jazz, building an audience is challenging for jazz. It's a modest group of people, shall we say. But Newark is like this home for jazz and has, bred a lot of really great jazz artists. So we thought, okay, how do we really activate jazz here? So I was in the lobby for one of the performances, and this black woman was standing next to me, and she was saying, I just love jazz. This was really great. So I just turned to her and I said, oh, may I get your information? I'd like to talk to you about that more. And so I called her the next day, and I said, I would love to create a jazz advisory committee. Would you like to head that for me? And so she said, yes. And the way, it's all in how you ask. And the way I asked was like, this will be the most exciting thing that has ever happened to you ever in your life. And of course you're going to say yes. So she said yes, at least that's what I heard was yes. And so we started building this jazz advisory committee. So it's like, well, what's their function? Promote jazz, celebrate jazz, bring people back here to NJPAC. Well, who knew that Kay, who was the woman I'm talking about, was extremely connected. She had people who were in advertising and marketing that she brought in who loved jazz on her committee. They put together a promotional deck that was unbelievable. We could not implement most of it because it cost a lot of money. But what it did do was open up the conversation about how do people want to experience jazz. So she said, we want jam sessions. You're putting it on the big stage with 3,000-seat theater. That's nice, but what about jam sessions that are just in nice, intimate clubs? So we're like, okay, how do we do that? So one of the members of the Jazz Advisory Committee is James Austin, who, this is what he does. He's a jazz musician, and he knows a lot of artists. So we started to look around Newark at different jazz clubs we could go to, and so we created this jazz jam series. And so we did, the first year we did 2. Then last year, I think we did 6. And we went to different clubs, we went to the shopping malls, we went to some churches, and all of them were beyond capacity. And what it did was, one, it branded NJPAC in your community. Because I believe you have to take the art to where people live. It can't always just be come to my house. You got to go to their house. And so we're in your community with an art form that we think you'll like. And we're at a place that that's familiar. And that there'll be income generated as a result of us coming because people are going to buy drinks. So it's a benefit all around. So these jam sessions have been beyond successful. The value internally is that my director of communication starts to write a press release about it. So now he's announcing NJPAC's Jazz Jam Sessions, in your community. Then our social media manager, she's posting each week where we're going, and people are commenting on what these sessions are like. So that's why you need the internal collaboration so that you can control the narrative, so you can tell the story. So then I got this phone call. Always pick up your phone. You never know who's calling. It's amazing. I got this phone call from the head of the Jewish museum and synagogue, same person. There's only one synagogue left in Newark. Used to be over 100. There's only one left. And so he called. His name is Eric. And Eric said, could you come here and look at our museum and synagogue? They're in the same building. I just think you should come and see. Maybe there's something we can do together. So John, my boss, we said, let's go. And so we went, and so we walked around. It was lovely, small, And John said, okay, you know what? We'll bring a little jazz trio here. We'll do a performance to launch our jazz festival, and that will be that. Eric had other plans. Eric said, okay, that's nice, but we have a museum. And everything that our synagogue does is rooted in civil rights. We're always examining what is the role between Jews and African Americans. So we thought, oh, this is interesting. And so we started to talk, and so we thought we would come up with an art exhibit. So I'm not an art curator, and I don't even have any art at NJPAC other than what's on the walls. But Rutgers Institute for Jazz Studies has tons. And so I called them. I said, would you like to partner with us on an exhibition at the Jewish Museum? So they're like, okay, yeah. Then I called WBGO Radio and asked would they be our promotional partner so they can talk about it, not only at the end, but as we build this whole process. So Amy was like, I'm in. So now I got a team. So we're sitting down, so we come up with this title, Jazz, Jews, and African Americans, Cultural Intersections in Newark and Beyond. So this was this 80-piece art exhibit that we put into the museum. We had the opening reception with the jazz trio that we had promised, but this led to 9 other subsequent events that were incredible. Not only did they take place at the synagogue and the museum, but they took place in the Baptist church. They took place at Rutgers. So we were able to be in your community, branding jazz and NJPAC in a lot of different ways. Over 2,000 people came to these various events and allowed us to talk about jazz in a way we'd never done in places we had never been. And that came as a result of a phone call and listening to what the vision that Eric had, And so when we talk about budget, I didn't have any money for an exhibition, but Rutgers paid for it, yay. And my only cost was the trio, because the museum itself, they printed the programs for all the events. We did panel discussions, we had symposiums. We really unpacked this relationship between jazz, Jews, and African Americans from so many different perspectives. And we received over 20 different articles in the media, in the newspapers and magazines, because this was something that was of interest to so many different people. So this is how you start to build these organizations. The churches in the neighborhood became our partners. So there's a Baptist church, a Catholic church, Episcopalian, Brazilian church right on the corner where the synagogue is. And I invited all of them to become a part of NJPAC's faith-based advisory committee. So they now are with us regularly to talk about programming and ways that we can encourage their congregation to participate. As part of the jazz promotions, we do a visual art exhibition. Again, I love art. So a lot of my motivation is things that I like. And so there's an organization called Women in Media in Newark. And I was just having lunch with the organizer, and I said, so, what do you think we can do together? And she said, well, we're doing our Women's History Month events in March. And I thought, oh, well, maybe we could do an exhibition. She said, well, women are like jazz. And I went, oh, you're right. That could be the name of the exhibit, Like Jazz. And so, Like Jazz, a visual perspective. And this was works by women artists based in Newark, that we had on exhibit for a month. We had an opening reception, and again, an extraordinary way of bringing people to the Arts Center, highlighting local artists. The cost was just the mounting of the work within the building. I have a film series, and so True Diversity film series. is another opportunity I have to engage the community. So this came about through one of our local corporations, PS&G, who wanted to respond to the shootings in Ferguson as a corporation. And they were told, well, as a corporation, we really don't want to get directly involved, but find an arts organization that might be able to be a partner for you. So they called us at NJPAC. So as a result, we created this film series called True Diversity Film Series, and we've shown 4 films so far. When I started talking to the faith-based community, they said, well, would you please show Selma? Because our kids don't understand the civil rights legacy. They think everything started with them. And they need to know what people did 40, 50 years ago. It's like, no problem. So we showed Selma. We provided buses to the church youth ministry to make sure we could pick up the kids, bring them in. We had popcorn and juice for them. And I can't tell you the appreciation that the churches felt for us, 1, listening, and 2, taking action. You know, so this is why you have to place yourself in the community. I go and speak every month at the Mayor's Office of Clergy Affairs. And I go and I thank them for their support. I'll tell them what's coming up, and then I'll ask them, what would you like to see at the Arts Center? Again, placing yourself where people are. Then Harlem. So as you know, I worked in New York for a long time and have great friends in Harlem, and I thought, well, Newark and Harlem aren't that far away. How can we make this connection? And so now, our Jazz for Teens, which is our youth professional performing group, perform during Harlem Week, which takes place in August. It's a big outdoor festival. We perform for the New York City Marathon. We perform at the jazz clubs. And now, the Harlem Week organizers are bringing their groups to the Arts Center for our shows. So it's really become this cross-promotional kind of event. And then the last thing I just want to highlight in this packet is our preludes. You know, again, it's like, how do you use what you have? So we have a beautiful arts center. We have these big events that come up. So I invite local youth organizations to perform in the lobby prior to the show. We call those preludes. They'll do a 20-minute performance. They bring a group in, so there's an income-generating component as well as highlighting and celebrating our young people. So these are just some of the things that we've been able to do that we can clearly indicate success and, you know, it matching what the budget allocation was for that. So just in closing, you know, I just encourage all of you to use today as a launching. Whatever you've been doing has been great. Today is going to be even greater. So moving forward, you know, I certainly have the expectation that you'll respond to the initiative of your leadership to really make a difference here, to look at your internal as well as your external efforts in building cultural diversity, and to recognize and to say to yourself, anything less is unacceptable. You know, and I'm going to be part of the success here in Cincinnati and the surrounding neighborhood region. I want to be the ones who lead what that looks like. And I will be watching and looking forward to celebrating all of the success with you. So I think now we're going to open up for a little Q&A and dialogue.
Would you like to sit? I think you should sit. You've been standing for almost an hour.
I'm going to sit like Oprah.
So we're going to open the floor. I have so many questions that I could just keep this going between the two of us, but that wouldn't be fair to the rest of the folks in the room. But I do want to comment on one thing you said, which really resonated with me, which reminded me of something that Billy Shore, who started Share Our Strength, was here a couple years ago, and he has a series of rules for getting it done. And rule number 3 is you got to have capacity. Yes. And you started out by saying, you can't do this just by wishing well. You can't do this just by saying, okay, this is your assignment now. You have to be willing to invest time, expertise, but also dollars to get this done. And I thought that was a really critical point that you made. And now I want to turn it over to you for your questions. When you stand, would you please speak loudly so we can hear you and tell us your name and your organization?
Oh, that must mean everyone is doing,
Please go ahead. Yes, thank you, and Dina.
Thank you. This is actually my first
Lunch and learn.
and I see I'm only Indian American Zoom. We are, my name is Anisha Singh. We are founding here All Shapes Theater, and our mission is to bridge the theater of East and West, bring the voice of diversity into theater, and social activism through theater. And what we are looking for is support from, I know ArtsWave did support one of our South Asian theater festival we did, and ArtsWave supported. And we
That's great. And your question for Donna is?
My question is, in terms of, in your Newark, how did you engage, were you able to engage the Indian American community? What are the other, how do you
Yes.
access this particular?
I think really about cultures generally, all cultures, right? How are you doing that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, specifically with the South Asian, we have a show that comes in every year called Mystic India. Mystic India. And it's a big Bollywood show. It's got 65 dancers, 1,200 costumes. It's amazing. And so we contact, again, now I use Google. And I use on my, I have an advisory council, and one of the committees is internal. On my internal committee, I have several South Asian. And so I asked them, I said, who are the cultural leaders in your community, and where are they? And so with that list, we went to them and said, we've got Mystic India coming. We would love for you to be a part of this. Can you help us be a promotional partner? And so they started helping us selling tickets. They told us what parades to be at. You come here, distribute your material, come to this temple. So it opened doors that we would not have known. And because it's consistent, we've been able to build on that. We also do a lot of rentals of Indian artists that come into the Newark area. And so even if it's not Mystic India, they're coming to see famous musicians and other people that they like. So that has been able to develop and grow because of our programming, quite frankly, and allowing them to see this is a way that we're honoring your culture and your legacy. And that's what we do with all the different demographics. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Welcome.
Great, thanks. Great question. Anybody else? Please, Catherine, and then we'll go back there.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you again. I'm
You're
Catherine
welcome.
Devin from Peace. And I've heard you talk a lot of advisory committees. So my question is, how many advisory committees do you currently have?
Okay.
What's the size of them? And as a marketing person, it seems like you're mostly in meetings with these advisories and making connections. So in a ratio of, in the cultural development of different audiences, how much time are you out of the office actually developing that?
Oh, great question. So I have 8 advisory committees that form my council. When I first got to NJPAC, there was already faith-based, Pride, Latino, corporate. I added Celebrate Dance, because dance is my first love, I'm not ashamed. So I have Celebrate Dance, I added Jazz, I added internal committee because I wanted to make sure there was investment internally. And I also added elders because we have a Kwanzaa program. Every year we honor 2 elders, and then nothing ever happens with them. So I thought, let me bring them in as a committee to let me know how can I engage their demographic more. Their function, all of them, is to promote and celebrate the Arts Center. And so we meet with them 3 times a year. We have a collective meeting with everyone together, and then each committee has co-chairs. The co-chairs will report, this is what we're going to do for the year. So my dance committee does the dance workshops all throughout the year, free dance workshops all throughout Newark. My jazz committee curated the jazz jam session. Faith-based committee promotes the gospel shows, Dance Theater of Harlem, Revelations. Our Pride Committee leads us with all the LGBTQ events that we start taking place in June. So they all have a clear focus. We make sure they have the tools. We give them each a toolkit, which is social media posts, because you want to always control the narrative. So they get the social media stuff, press releases, photos, images, show description, prices, all of that information. We send them immediately. And then the time out of the office, a lot. I don't believe, I'm so glad you asked that question, because engaging communities is not by email. It's really not by phone. It is face-to-face, heart-to-heart, looking in the person's eyes and letting them feel your passion and commitment. If you're not doing that, then it's just simply an exercise. And so I'm out a lot, as is my team. In fact, I'm clocking them. I'm like, I see you too much. Get out. I'm seeing you too much. Bye-bye. And it takes courage. You got to go to these new neighborhoods. Yeah, go with the coat of the arts. That makes you fearless. You can do anything with that.
I'm reminded of your comment, Donna, that when you first got to the public, you were pretty comfortable in your own zone too, and
very.
so you had to get way out of your own comfort zone to really do the work there, and
Exactly.
and so thanks for reminding us of that again. Come out from behind the pole and ask your question.
Hi, Katrina. Thank you for coming here and
Welcome.
all that information. Awesome. My question for you particularly is, within everything that you're doing,
I think the arts is probably the strongest tool we have for healing in our communities, and I use it as such. And so it's a way to recognize individuals who have not been recognized before. So the choices of the films that we show in our film series, it's about that. It's about recognizing legacy, honoring heritage. After each film, we have a panel discussion, and the panel is based on local individuals who are doing just that kind of work, whether it's in the legal field, social work, whatever that is. You know, as we do, I usually frame my events with dialogue. So there's either a symposium, a town hall, a panel discussion, and it's at that point that we can unpack what this really means for you personally and how do we feel we can move forward. So yes, that is an integral component of the work I've always done, and I will continue to do, because for me, it's the most effective way. I'm a lawyer, and I could easily be in the court, but to me that wasn't healing what my mission in life, this lifetime, was supposed to be. So the work I'm doing now is absolutely what I'm supposed to be doing, and I do it every day with great joy and expectation, absolutely. Mhm. You're welcome.
Yes, Jay, go ahead.
What were some of your measurable goals as far as just how you did that?
Sure, sure. So when I set up my department, I created a dashboard because I wanted us to be taken seriously. And at NJPAC, everything is based on the dashboard. You know, earned revenue, number of audiences, how many people, all of that. So it's like, I'm doing my own dashboard too, because this is not just a little side gig. This is not something to be taken lightly. So I want to be in the conversation of a solid business principle that has solid deliverables that can be measured. So my dashboard then, all of the events that I mapped out to you, that's on my dashboard, and then what I projected as the results. So for my books on the move, I said we would do 6. We did 6. I said we would have over 25 people. We did. For my jazz jam sessions, I said we would do 6, and that we'd be at these venues, and this is the capacity. For group sales is in my department. So my group sales goal was 450,000. We're at 453 right now. Our fiscal year ends June 30th. So I've surpassed that goal. You know, my colleges and universities, that's another area on my dashboard. I said I would engage 5 new colleges to be partners with community engagement, not student rush. I'm not interested in student rush. I'm interested in classes that we work with on a curriculum content basis. So I work with Farley-Dickinson University, Rutgers University, where my shows provide content for the professors to better highlight some of the issues that they're talking about. And then they host panel discussions for us. So we've done that. My advisory committee, I said that the advisory committee would generate over $35,000 in ticket sales, because that's a solid, measurable goal. So we've accomplished that. So my dashboard is all the events that I said we would do, and then how do we reach those numbers. The only one that's in the yellow is my remote box office, because I like to take our box office to different corporations and different places to sell tickets on site. And that, we probably won't make that goal. You know, I said we would do 10,000. I think we're still at 4,000, and I don't have any other places to go. That's the only one that might be a yellow, but I still might make it green.
All very measurable. I think this will be our last question here, and then I expect Alicia will have a couple of closing remarks for us.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Emily.
Hello.
The Cincinnati Museum Center, and we're going under a major restoration where some parts of the building won't be accessible to the public for maybe 2.5 years.
Wow.
So a community engagement department's been developed. I'm on that team. Other members of the team are here. So thank you for coming. It's been very eye-opening. Do you have a metric that you and your team follow to say yes or no when people want to do? You said as long as it's legal, you're okay. But do you have anything where if someone wants you to do something, you say no, or do you always say yes?
Sure. I mean, I say yes in my head, but I mean, yes, I have to be, I hate to say the word, but I do have to be practical. You know, I mean, as I mentioned, I have a limited number of staff, and it's just relative. My 5 to you might be like huge, but in a nonprofit with a budget of our size, it's small. You know, so no, I can't do every single thing I would love to do, but I try to, one, make sure that whoever's proposing it knows that I heard them. And that if I can't do it this year, I'm going to try really hard to do it next year. For instance, we have a DJ that wanted to spin in our restaurant after a big comedy show we're having. And so we tried to make it work. We won't be able to do it this time, but we've already have him scheduled to do it in November. You know, with my classical music, you know, I'm really trying to move the needle with that, because so far we only present white classical orchestras, and so the cultural of color participation is below 1%. And so what I'm doing is taking some of our classical musicians of color and conductors, I'm taking them around to different venues to talk about classical music and why we should be a part of those experiences and conversation. So it's not what I would love to do, but it's a start. So I've learned to make it work to the best of my ability, and sometimes it's borderline legal, but I try to make it work.
Please join me in thanking Donna Walker-Kuhne for such great insight. And now we'll turn it over to Alicia Kintner.
Well, I'll just add my thanks as well to Donna for spending lunch with us and inspiring us and challenging us as well. I know I feel personally challenged, and you're right, the time for action is now because the stakes are high, and our country needs the arts and artists and all of you doing this work so that we can heal and come together, and never has there been a greater time than this, and I feel like I say that way too often, so obviously there's more to do. Our next Lunch and Learn, I need to also thank Mary Stagaman for stepping in. Mary chairs, I think you know, the pillar of the blueprint that we call Bridging Cultural Divides, and we're just getting going, figuring out how to put our advisory council around that work. But that's a commitment that we have, and we're very fortunate to have Mary's leadership at the board level as well. Our next Lunch and Learn will be in the fall, but we do have project grant workshops coming up in July and some grant writing workshops, if that's of interest to anyone. And I think we're also still doing Arts Atlas training. The third Thursday of most months. And Arts Atlas is our tool, if you haven't looked at it, where you can actually drill down neighborhood by neighborhood, see demographics, see schools, see resources like community gardens and churches and libraries, and figure out where, as artists and arts organizations, you might want to explore next with that wonderful coat of the arts on. I love that metaphor. Thanks to all of you for joining us, and we will see you very soon. Take care.